In 2001, Michel Cohen disappeared, having committed one of the largest thefts in art world history. He has never been seen since, until now.
If he surfaces, we will find him.
I mean, he's basically on the run for his entire life.
There were so many knowledgeable dealers that were entrusting him with tremendous amounts of money.
He came in and tried to sell us a Picasso painting.
He would basically sign for it and take the work of art.
That's the craziest thing about the art world.
Millions of dollars.
If you had to hazard a guess as to where he is now, Uruguay,
Panama?
South America, probably.
Probably lounging on a beach.
You know, in all the movies they'll go to Mexico or somewhere to hide out.
I believe there was a contract put out on him and he's dead.
did you ever hear how much money Michel stole?
I would say 40 million or better.
I think the total was a little over 50 million.
Every month or so I would do a Google search to find out some information.
Have you found anything?
No, nothing.
Can you tell me your name?
Michel Cohen.
He came from a poor suburb of France. I was told his father was a cab driver. I don't know if any of this is true.
I think he was maybe 16 or 17, and he pushed his mother to divorce her husband because he was abusive to her.
I think his father, abandoned them. The only possible provider had to be Michel.
He had to take care of his mother, brother, and sister. Had that idea that money would save the day. He was a nice school dropout, but very, very bright, great memory. He also loved to play chess, and he was very good at it. Chess strategy, figuring things out several moves ahead. For him, maybe life was a bit like a chess game.
By the age of 19, he was selling the Encyclopedia Britannica door to door, and he was the #1 salesman in France.
Richard, how did you meet Michel Cohen?
We met, I believe it was in 1976, in Paris, in a club, dancing, disco days. He had the feeling that things were not moving fast enough, and was wanting something more, so we went to America to check it out. We moved around California quite a lot, and the Grand Canyon, everything. We bought a used Cadillac, metallic pink, white interior. Good old days. In San Francisco, we met somebody who had bought a ton of lithographs. So we went there and bought a stack of things like that.
And selling that artwork got me $15 a piece. And it was my first income in the States. So I did that for a year, and then I started visiting art galleries.
That was around the time we met Ed Russell, and he was a source of a lot of information.
He was an opportunist. He took every opportunity handed to him, and the more power to him for that. Because you could not help wanting to help Michel Cohen.
I saw an ad in an art magazine for a gallery in San Francisco. I called the number and said, "Hi, I'm Howard Russick." He said, "My name is Michel Cohen." We talked, got to know each other, had a few laughs. One day he asked me to meet him for drinks, and he proposed I lend him some money. And he told me about a New Zealand racing boat that was for sale. And if I lent him the money, he promised to pay it back in 3 months.
How much money was it?
I think it was 50,000, and I wrote him a check, and within a short period of time, he returned the investment. And it was all good.
Michel told me the story of his family. As the Germans marched into Paris, Michel's grandfather said to Michel's mother, "You need to take your younger brother and sister out of Paris and protect them during the war." And she did. And somehow, they were safe in the outskirts of Paris. There were two sides to Michel. There was a love for things that were simple and real and natural. And then there was the notion that money solved all of your problems, so you better have a lot of it to protect yourself.
Did you call Michel Cohen Michael or Michel?
Michel. Well, initially it was Michel.
And did it change?
It did. After a while he became somewhat of a serious dealer. It became Michel. I don't know why. I think it made the dealers feel good to call him Michel. It made us feel more international. Like, he's sophisticated. You call him Michel, not Michel. He's French.
Did he know much about art then?
No. Michel knew nothing about art in the beginning. Nothing. Michael, Michel. Nothing mattered except the value of the commodity.
I don't think Michael knew anything about art. In fact, Michael didn't love art or even like art, actually. Michael could have sold anything, and as it turned out, he sold art.
He had piles of auctions catalogs, and he would remember them by heart. I remember those catalogs, and he would have post-it notes on almost every page. He would remember the size of the painting, the year of the painting, the price it did at auction. He would basically remember everything.
In 1987, I believe it was, he set up his own small gallery in San Francisco. It was called Pentimento, and he started out mostly with prints.
It was good for New York to have an art dealer on the West Coast, so he would go visit them and see what they had for sale. He would say, "Oh, I have just a client for that. I'd like to have this painting. Could I borrow it? I will just come back in an hour." He would borrow the painting, take it across the street to another art dealer, who would never cross the street like that, by the way, and sell it to that guy. And you know, in New York, it's very wheeling and dealing all the time, and it has a speed, and people are like, "Oh yeah, let's make it happen fast." And Michel loved that. He would say, "I can make a deal a day in New York."
It was what I was good at, you know? A good image, finding out what people liked. Because we all like different things, so you have to look for the right painting.
Michel always loved the nice things. He thought, the more rich you look, the more trustworthy you are. And you know, the nice suit, the tidy shirt. He created a bit of this character of a very successful art dealer. He would buy a car, drive it, 3 months, and then sell it. And buy another one, and then sell it. And buy another. So I said to Michel, "Do you know you've actually lost $90,000 on car this year?"
Yeah, but I didn't like the seats.
Was he very focused on making money?
You're asking me that? Are you serious? I mean, my one mantra to Michel Cohen was, "Michel, stop. There's such a thing as enough. You cannot be your clients. You never will be your clients. The collectors always have a win in the dealers, and you see how a collector lives."
I mean, you must have money to collect art. This is an elitist business.
These people, they have money, and they live well. Vacation homes, all the toys.
You know, the cars.
the watches.
All the nonsense.
And he was thrilled by this lifestyle.
He wanted to be part of that world.
And you know, where there is a classic, "I come from poverty, I never want to go back there," or "I live in fear of going broke," that, I don't know, but definitely wanting the good life.
In 1990, Michel moves to LA, and it's around this time he meets Tanya Vanessa.
She liked to work with living artists. Her thing was to one day open up an art gallery and show off young artists. So I went out, looking for adventure again.
In 1992, Michel moves to New York with Tanya and opens up a gallery. While Tanya shows contemporary art in the gallery, Michel sells modern masters out of the back room.
So, the nature of what I was doing was, you go get a painting from a gallery, you shop it around, you're looking for a buyer. You bring it to your own gallery, put it up on the wall, and make it seem like it's your property. A buyer comes along, looks at it, and goes, "No." So you take it down, you take off your sticker, and you just return it to the original owner. So you sort of like inch yourself into the industry, maybe half an hour a day. But the buyers start to know your name. They get to know you. And if it sells, normally that's just like, 10% commission? But if it's $1 million, that's $100,000 from lugging a painting from one place to the next. So, 1 or 2 of those a month.
Michael Cohen went from somebody who nobody knew to somebody who a lot of people knew to a very different plateau where everyone knew him, including major galleries, auction houses, collectors and dealers around the world.
He got an incredible inventory, incredible Dubuffets, incredible Chagalls, and then all of a sudden he was selling these major works of art. So was he considered a major dealer then? Yeah. And all the big circles and all the big name viewers, they bought from him. He was good.
He was soft-spoken. He was charming, and I think he was a shrewd business person.
Did you like him? Paul?
Yeah, I did like him.
Did you trust him?
Yeah, I did.
We did a lot of business with him at my gallery, the Russet Gallery. A lot of business. And he was considered one of our closest associates. When he was selling the big pictures, they were up in the millions. He would basically just sign for it and take the work of art.
Did he literally just take it under his arm and walk it down the street?
Small enough he would. Big enough he would get it tracked.
He managed to get the trust of these people who would actually send him paintings without any paperwork. That's the craziest thing about the art world.
My reputation was great. I wasn't a dealer who had been around through generations, but I could get pictures of 2, 3, 4 million. That's just on your reputation. It takes years to build. A few seconds only to lose.
We can't put an exact date on it, but it's around this time in the early 90s that Michel starts options trading.
So I decided that I wanted to start day trading stocks. So I went out and I bought this device called the Quotrek, where you can track and trade options in real time. And you can hold it in the palm of your hand. So Michael and I were hanging out those years. He started asking about it. He became fascinated. And in short, he went out and he opened an account, a trading account. He bought a Quotrek and he went at it.
What was your first successful trade?
20,000 I invested, and I got back 100,000 in days. That's better than art because it's so liquid and the returns are tremendous.
I used to see him at auctions all the time. He was always on the phone, talking to his broker, or on his cell phone. Sell this! So it seemed to me like he was making all his money in the art. And then he started getting about the stock market. It was more important he was on the phone doing the stocks than he was about selling the art.
There was something in Michael's nature that was never satisfied with just making a good living, which he was, and destined to make an even greater living as an art dealer, but it was too slow for him.
He managed to invest like $35,000.
In a matter of 4 months, he turned into
3.5 million!
For him, it was he never knew would say.
I can really feel the market. I know where it's going. I can smell it.
In 1996, Michel gets lucky on the options market again and turns a 30,000 stake into an astonishing $14 million. So around this time, he meets and marries his wife. They have 2 children and move to Malibu, where Michel continues to buy and sell art from the West Coast.
We went to Circles on the Point, his house in Malibu, and it was like something out of a movie.
He had a black rose in the driveway.
He had a chef.
What will we be having for lunch, Mr. Cohen?
For me, that was it. Like, this guy had his own chef.
Of course, he had plenty of art there too.
I went to his wife and said, don't you think you ought to save a little bit?
I know, but he says it's okay, and I think he's a genius.
He had a pool boy,
Okay.
A gardener.
a maid.
We bought some horses for the kid, but they were a little too young for that.
His wife was an ex-champion of horse
They
jumping.
were a little scared.
It cost him $2 million.
On top of $1 million mortgage.
And the cars, add another 5,000.
How much for the horses?
14,000.
7,000 pony.
Plus the upkeep, that's maybe 3,000.
So it's all adding up, isn't it?
Still within the limits of what I was making.
And then in the autumn of 2000, Michel moves his family back to the centre of the art world in New York.
They brought the horses with them.
I was shocked.
They rented an apartment that back then was $25,000 a month.
He was living across the street from Johnny Versace.
Their rent was like $35,000.
Don't know if any of this is true.
Michael was not just living the high life, but also an incredibly fast life.
From the outside, everything looked fine.
Though people would call me and ask,
Is everything okay with Michel?
He looks like he's lost weight.
He looks very fidgety.
I knew we were getting very close to the drama point.
I knew there were certain days where he would just lose a vast fortune that he couldn't afford to pay back.
Michael didn't have a clue what he was doing in the options market. A couple of the brokerage houses shut him down because they didn't want any liability charges.
He lost $1 million in a day because of his investment choices.
How much was the debt in the summer of 2000?
Oh, it was less than 15.
Million.
Yeah.
And what happened is, as with any gambler, he would take a position and he would lose. He would take a bigger position and he would lose. He would take an even bigger position, he would lose, and somehow Michael ran out of money. I don't know how much or how quickly it was, but he started needing money from outside to support this because he had the belief that now I can pay it back and I can repay my debts.
I was observing like a train crash in slow motion, because the level of debt was, it was really crazy. Because then he started using the money from the paintings to play the market.
That's when he started going to his colleagues, collectors and Sotheby's, asking either for loans or consignment of artwork that would then put in the auction market and cover his losses, and of course make money and get back on track.
I tried to get back losses and pay off the loans like I did before. And in my mind, I always thought I'd pay them back. I mean, one good trade and I would have made the money and no one would have known what I did.
These are the American Express bills. Even though he's in dire straits financially, his spending is still through the roof.
1,800 in Prada.
$2,500 on bed linen.
More than 13,000 in a hotel in Palm Beach.
$500 on children's clothes.
6 weeks before he fled, and he's spending nearly $4,000 in a watch shop.
Same week, he spends $22,500 on a Steinway piano.
This is the man who is going under financially, and it doesn't seem to be holding him back. He's still spending thousands of dollars on his gym membership.
Self-assurance?
The notion that money solves all of your problems, so you better have a lot of it to protect yourself.
Still feeling like the good old days are still the good old days?
I don't know if any of this is true.
Never satisfied with just making a good living.
You know the classic, I come from poverty and I want to go back there.
Definitely wanting a good life.
It's absurd.
You bought a Steinway piano for $22,500. Do you remember doing that?
Yes,
Why did you do that?
because
Michel?
I wanted the kids to learn piano.
The thing that's a bit contradictory for me is on the one hand you're saying you wanted to pay everyone back. At the same time, you're spending $22,500 on a piano, $1,300 on Ralph Lauren, $13,000 on each hotel.
That was a holiday, you know. I owed 20 or 30 million. It's not making much of a difference if I spend another 50,000, is it? I mean, especially if you have an American Express card. You don't pay for those. You only pay the interest.
I suppose some people, when they get into debt, they do everything they can to claw back every dime, but it sort of seems as though you weren't doing that.
The apartment was empty, okay? I didn't have an office, I didn't have a gallery, we had clients coming in, and I can't just have an office with a sofa and a couple of paintings.
I noticed he had that way of retwisting things in his mind, that it would follow a narrative that would be good for him.
Do you think he had a guilty conscience about what he was doing? In January 2001, when Sotheby's, one of the biggest art brokerages in the world, realizes Michel has defaulted on the $10 million he owes them, it's them that call the cops and blow the whole thing wide open.
There was a story posted online about Sotheby's filing suit against him for the recovery of some loans that was still outstanding. And that's when we began to be concerned about his liability as it comes to me. As each day went by, it became clearer that we were not alone, that there were many of us who were owed millions.
This is the breakdown of what the FBI know to be Michel's fraudulent, what the Americans call wire transfers. You can see the name of the artist and the amount. So we've got Picasso, 200,000. For Monet and the Met, someone sent him over $1 million for that. Another $5 million for that. A Dali, nearly $3 million. Chagall, another Monet. That's that Picasso again, 3.9 million. And that's that Picasso again, 4 million. So he's selling the same painting over and over again for very large amounts of money. This is the Picasso you borrowed from Paul Gray. He gave it to you on consignment. You never paid anything for it. and you told him you could sell it for $2.2 million.
Yes.
And then, without his permission, you put it on a private plane to Iowa where you sold it to a collector for $4.5 million.
No, that's completely false.
So when Paul Gray said you took the painting and never paid him, you're saying he's lying?
No, I never paid him.
You never paid him?
No, I have an invoice. You own it completely.
When you paid for it?
Yeah, so
you didn't pay?
No. I have an invoice. I may be able to get a hold of that invoice.
But we're sort of splitting hairs here, aren't we? Because you took a painting from him worth $2.2 million. And whether or not there was an invoice, you never returned the painting.
No!
So you stole the painting?
No, it's not stealing. It's like a robbery. I have an invoice. There are many examples of galleries who buy your picture and then don't pay or only pay half if they have money problems, so that's not stealing. Stealing is when you rob something. It's when you...
But if you take a painting and never paid for it, that's stealing.
No, it's not. You owe the money if you have an invoice.
I'm calling it stealing. You're saying you still owe him $2.2 million. Is that correct?
Yes, whatever the invoice says, but he invoiced me for that picture. I mean, he even got a check for it for $200,000 that bounced. So that in itself is proof that it was a sale.
As well as selling Bill Beagleston a half share in the Monet. At the same time, you sold that painting to a collector in Switzerland for $5 million, and to an investor in LA for another $5 million. So 3 different people in total gave you $12.5 million for that one painting that wasn't even for sale.
You're forgetting that these are all loans.
Loans you haven't paid back.
No, exactly.
This is what I don't understand, Michelle. I can't tell. I can't tell if you're being dishonest with me or if you're being dishonest with yourself. Because say these are all loans. 18 years after the event, taking $12.5 million from people you never paid back, and you have no means of paying them back. That is not a loan. That is theft.
But they were loans at the time. But you asked me at the time. I didn't know that 18 years later I wouldn't be able to pay them back.
They say gamblers gamble until they lose and not until they win. Michel gambled until he lost everything.
We were served court papers at the apartment where we lived. And we were followed.
We went to Michel's apartment with the sheriff. We walked out to the door, and there were 7 copies of the New York Times piled up on the mat. And we knew that the apartment was empty.
Right up until the very end, there was always a chance he was going to pull a rabbit out of his hat, He'd done it before, never on that scale. But then there was the final phone call, where it was just kind of sad and lost. And I was like, oh my God, Michel. It was like seeing your parents cry. And that was it. It was gone. And then the accountants called me like, go look at the paper. And that's how I saw I had no job. I saw the New York Post headline, like, the biggest art swindler ever. That's my boy.
On the 27th of January 2004, Michel Cohen fled from New York, having stolen a total of $55 million.
There was a story he went to Germany because his wife was German.
We suspect he'd moved to Israel.
I don't know if any of this is true.
Unfortunately, I imagine he's in prison.
I still think I see him sometimes.
Do you?
I mean, who knows? He could be around. He was pretty sneaky.
I don't know where he is to this day, if in fact he's still alive.
I have no idea.
So many people were in such shock that Michael or Michel did anything like this.
It was a shock to the art world.
I know there were a lot of people who were really angry. Who'd probably like to have him killed.
Angry. They were crazy. There were stories about hiring hitmen to kill him. They didn't care about the money, they just wanted him dead.
This was about people who have assets, millions, billions. Their life wasn't even affected. My life was destroyed.
What was your reaction to that, Susanna? To being swindled in that way?
I was disgusted. I was outraged. For us and for everyone else. There was no sense of remorse on his part because You're just gone.
Did you ever consider staying and letting yourself be arrested?
Yeah. But then a lawyer told me that in the States you get 5 years per count. So if you have 7 counts...
You actually had 24 counts in the end.
then it would have been 24 times 5. Maybe it would have been 12 times 5. But I mean, any way you looked at that, that was like the death sentence. I was 48 years old at the time, so why should I wait for a 20-year sentence, a 15-year sentence? It's not like I killed anybody.
You coward. Coward! Coward! Coward!
I was able to take $8,000. I didn't know where to go. So I flew to Madrid. I said, where should I go? Then I saw a flight that was leaving quite soon, to Rio. So I said, you know what? I'll go to Rio. Another adventure. I just focused on finding my way around, looking at schools, you know, a new life.
Antonio, when you met Michel, was he using his real name, Michel Cohen?
Yes, he used his real name. Based on the place where they lived and the type of contract they gave me as their driver, it all indicated he was rich. They had money, they paid for everything in cash. The nanny's salary, the maid's salary, my salary. Anything they bought on the street was paid for in cash.
Did you have any sense of where the money was coming from?
No. All I knew at the time was that he had a company, he was a businessman, and he worked with investments.
In the middle of 2002, we had another child, our youngest. And it was quiet. So you start to forget about the previous life in the States. It was a happy moment. And I only got to live with him for 6 months.
We went to the police station. I went as a witness to make sure that they didn't harm him. He was under arrest by federal police and Interpol, and I stayed there all day while he was being interrogated.
They took me to an underground prison that's like way outside Rio. Down a dark corridor underground. Everything's there. Look, people standing up in the dark, in their underwear, like animals in cages. They look dangerous. And I was there, underground, for 7 months. And then I got sick, so I asked to go to a hospital for a few days. And they said that the ambulance was broken.
I was told that he had taken ill and prison guards put him into a private car.
I was sitting at the back, and the guards were in front. They've got 2 guns, one at their legs and one at their sides. And suddenly we got into a one-way street. It was very crowded, lots of people everywhere. So for me, that was a chance to get out of the car and
Run! Where is he?
Cohen!
Having escaped from prison, Michel vanishes without a trace, leaving his family behind in Rio to fend for themselves. He spends about 6 weeks traveling through Brazil, crossing the Amazon and arriving in French Guiana in January 2004. In August of that year, he flies back to France. He had a cousin who'd married an Orthodox Jew who let him stay in his office for a couple of years. After he left Brazil, Roy, would he call you?
Yes, we've talked a few times, but he was mostly out of money the whole time. So he would borrow money from me. Well, borrow. He would ask me for money to help him, and I would send. At first, I would send 500 or 1,000, but I couldn't really keep doing this for too long. So I said to Michel, I have bills to pay myself. I can't keep doing this. You know, he wanted to go back into the market. It was a total obsession. That's what he wanted to do, day trading. To me, he felt like a drug addict. He had to have it, no matter what.
The Jews, they helped me. One of their fathers was very wealthy, so they invested some money with him. And with that I did quite well, but not for long. And in the end he lost.
He lost a lot.
So I couldn't stay in the office anymore.
At this point, Michel hits rock bottom and finds himself homeless on the streets of Paris.
When I ran out of money, I only had hot water and sugar. One time that happened 4 days in a row. But you know you can't sleep then because of the sugar. Feel your pulse in your head all night. It's awful. I never felt so low.
Did you blame yourself for the situation you were in?
I try to not dwell on the past because it's not productive. There are many things could have done, not have done. Mostly not have done. It's not in my mentality to have regrets.
After 5 years of not seeing your family, you're finally reunited with your wife and 3 children when they fly from Rio to join you.
Seeing my children again for the first time, that was intense.
And presumably your youngest child had only been a baby the last time you saw him.
He didn't even know who I was. He was looking at me like, "Who's that?" And his older brother, who was about 10 at the time, I had to tell him, "That's your dad."
No one knew what happened to Michel. After searching for him around the world, we finally found him living in obscurity in France. Describe a typical day for you now.
I take my son to school.
And how old is your youngest son now?
16.
Okay. So you take your son to school in the morning, and then
I take my wife to the train station, take the dog for a walk, I do the laundry, and
what do you do for money?
nothing.
Are you on welfare? Benefits?
Yes, I am.
Richard, do you still keep in touch with Michel?
No. I haven't spoken to him in a long time. You know, I got a little bit disgusted that the only conversation we could have was about me sending him money. So,
And what would you like the ending to be, Suzanne?
I would like for him to be in a 6x6 futsal with bars.
I would have liked to have got my money back.
I'd like him to be in jail.
What were the consequences for you in the Beagleston Gallery?
Bill became so disillusioned he just gave up. He said he didn't want to be in that business anymore.
And so he closed the gallery,
Yes,
and you lost your job.
yeah, I lost my job.
Do you know what happened to Bill Beagleston?
No?
Did you know that he became so demoralized by the theft that he closed the gallery, and everyone who worked there lost their jobs?
No, I thought he was very wealthy.
I think it was the betrayal that destroyed him in the end.
I'm sorry.
I think he must have always been dishonest. Because you don't go from one way to another, from one day good to one day bad. And he was very methodical about these things. This wasn't just a fly-by-night. He must have been thinking about these things for a long time. They were over months. I don't think that you can be a good person to be thinking those things.
People got hurt, financially. It was a fraction of what they owed, but they lost millions. They had every right to be angry. But it is my opinion that Michel was not somebody who created this grand scheme to defraud these people. The outcome for him was far more serious than it was for the people who lost money. Michel lost everything.
Michel wasn't a con man. Not in the beginning. Not ever. He was one of the most accomplished salespeople I've ever seen.
Yes, the nature of the art didn't treat him some favors.
There's always the possibility that he's going to jail. It doesn't matter how old you are, eventually you're gonna have to pay.
And eventually, the truth comes out.
Does the FBI know where you are now?
No. But if they do, they know they can't extradite.
As a French national living in France, Michel cannot be extradited to the USA. He cannot be put on trial, and he cannot go to prison. Michel Cohen, to this day, remains a fugitive from justice.